Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone joining us in our fifth iteration of live discussion with local peace builders on how their lives and their communities are being affected by the pandemic. My name is Cito. I am the program advisor for Conducive Space for Peace, a Danish-based organization that works on transforming the global peace building system to promote the agency of local peace builders. And today we are really going to have a very important and yet sometimes marginal discussion in our peace building community, and that is mental health and how it's affecting local peace builders. Now, before we move into the introduction of our panelists today, I also want to remind those who are joining us for the first time that this has been a conversation that Conducive Space for Peace and Peace Direct and Humanity United have started about a month ago to really try to gauge the level of impact in terms of how local peace builders are engaging with the pandemic. And they have produced a very important report, which I'm going to leave the link to here in our comment section so that you can have a look at it, in which they discussed or they talked to 400 local peace builders in 60 countries, highlighting some of the very difficult times that they're facing, but also some of the insights that they recommend to local peace builders, international organizations in addressing the pandemic. Now, without further ado, I would like to ask our panelists to introduce themselves, and we're going to start maybe with Janielle.
My name is Janielle Beh, and I am from Melbourne, Australia. For the last 2 years, I have been working in Kabul, Afghanistan, as a music educator and piano instructor at the Afghanistan National Institute of Music. And some of the local peace building involvement that I've had has been with co-founding and mentoring a local grassroots youth and peace building team in Kabul. So that's just a brief thing about myself.
Thank you very much for that. Let's hear now from Ehab. Ehab, can you hear us?
Yes, I hear you.
All right. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Hello, everyone. I'm Ehab Badwi. I'm the founder of the Syrian Youth Assembly, and as well, I'm the US representative of the World Organization of Scout Movement.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Ehab and Janielle, for your kind introduction. We are still waiting to have Antti, who is supposed to joining us from the US, but I'm sure that she'll be joining us in a few minutes. But as an introduction to this conversation, I think it's also very important and safe to say that the pandemic has had a mental impact on all of us. Not just local peace builders, but everyone right now has experienced some kind of anxiety, some kind of worry, some kind of sleeplessness. And all of this is really something that is weighing on our lives. But it's also important to say that local peace builders, especially those working in context of conflicts and those who are in the front lines of responding to this pandemic, are also dealing with another layer of mental anxiety. And just to bring you two quick examples, 2 weeks ago, Ugandan refugee in Kenya and LGBTQ rights actually killed himself, committed suicide in front of the UN compound. And one of the reasons why he allegedly committed suicide is because he had tried to get access to food during all this time, but he did not have any food. And another example I'd like to share with you, a friend of mine connected with me just a week ago from Brazil and told me that one of his very close friends, a local peace builder, had committed suicide as well. And this is because of the mental toll and the challenges and hopelessness really that they feel regarding not only the pandemic, but the repressive Brazilian regime right now, which is really affecting a lot of communities. So these are two examples, but they are not the only ones. And I'm sure we'll hear from our audience as well that is tuning in today, how the pandemic has affected them. But I would like to maybe ask our dear panelists, what has been, according to your own context, how have you seen the pandemic have a mental impact directly with you or with the people that you relate with? How has mental health manifested itself? Let's start with Ehab, if you may.
Yes, like sharing my experience of my personal situation from the last month, where I find myself, I moved totally online to work from home, to study from home, and also to communicate with my friends from home. Everything started to be from home, online. Like this is put me really in bad situation to start to not understand and not remember in which day we are. Like I just see the week, it's like one day where I start to lose my energy, where I start to lose my interest, where I start to lose my attention as well on my study, on my work. But at the same time, I find how much I'm protective normally when I'm going like this, and I start to see myself like this, and I start really to ask myself, do I need to have some help, some support for someone able to let me understand the situation right now? Like, because it's just come like a shock. We are shocked. We don't know what's happened. We are just in pandemic. No one allowed to go outside. No one allowed to travel. We start to lose our work. We start to lose our studies. Everything around us is really difficult. In this time, I start to see how I can help myself to save myself, and also to start keeping my work, keep my productivity as well. And this time, like from the experience I get, I start to ask about anyone able to help, to hear me, to try to explain for me where we are right now, how we can deal with the situation, how we can really try to rework on our life, our daily life, about how I deal with my study and how I have to deal with my work at home as well at the same time. This is from the small experience I get in the last month, maybe. Like there is a lot to share, but let's give more space.
Indeed. Thank you very much for highlighting that. Yes, the pandemic has moved all of us, our lives, to online working, and that has also come with a lot of challenges. It's an uncharted territory in terms of how do we even start working online? How do we engage conversations that are productive? And as you've pointed out, Ehab, when your energy, when your focus, when your interest starts stagnating, how do you refuel yourself positively so that you can still continue engaging? We're going to get back to that in our third component of this conversation, but I'd like also to hear from Janielle. What has been the mental impact of this pandemic to you or to people that you're relating with? How do you feel this pandemic affecting them?
As an educator, I obviously think a lot about my students and what they are facing. And as an educator in a low resource context and in a place that has already been affected by war and conflicts and poverty and a lot of these issues, this pandemic has created a situation whereby students from really tough backgrounds who usually don't have access to, internet and stuff like that, in this time, it's even more difficult because there's no way for connection with the outside world unless they have devices or they have internet access. So that's something that myself and the team that I'm working with, we're trying to work on so that we can provide some of those things after we have submitted proposals for funding, so that we can implement distance learning program. But I'm guessing that in terms of mental health, it's a unique situation that I've been in because living in Afghanistan, it has its challenges there, where because of the security situation, there are just some things you can't do in a country like that, and you're not as free to do as I would be back in Australia. So in terms of mental health, that's something that I've always been thinking about anyway, in connection with my work in music, is that what I try to do as a music educator in a place like this is to bring music as a source of therapy, as a source of expression, as a source of creative output in stressful or challenging or discouraging situations. And so that's something that I always encourage my students to do, is to compose and create music for their times and for their generation. And that's something I believe that everyone is able to do.
Fantastic. It's therapeutic, and it's actually a powerful tool to not only help us overcome difficult situations, but also to connect divided communities. Arts in general is a tool that can help bridge those gaps. Now, before we get into the substance of this conversation, I would like to return back to Ehab. I know you're working with a broad community of Syrians all around the world who not only during this pandemic, but even before the pandemic, were affected in a very significant way by what is happening in Syria. Do you want to maybe give us a little bit of a context on how Syrians, the ones you're relating with, are also dealing with this pandemic in this time, and what are the issues that they face in terms of mental health, if you may?
Yes, I would to thank you for about the question. It's a very interesting question, and I think it's important to try to raise the voice of young Syrians, to try to share as well with the problem young people, or what the challenge young people in Syria face right now, and also it's more come by the pandemic. Like the Syrian young people, before the pandemic, all the challenge we face about accessing the higher education or accessing job market, or in the same time to find that safe place where we can try to be more productive, more creative as well. Like the pandemic right now, it's make it more difficult and more hard, like because when we try to speak about development in the country and how able to build the capacity of young people before, we find it now it's more difficult to have it because of we are not able to do any more activity offline with the young people in the field together, where sometimes we don't have access to many young people. They don't have the online way to access to them right now in the pandemic, and normally it can be more active and more productive for them to be together in one place. And also as well, like young Syrian, where we try to bring that dialogue culture again and try to build this communication between young Syrian when they can meet together to speak about some issue, feed those young people, or at the same time to have more capacity building in different topics. Like how we deal right now with the pandemic, we try to focus more on the online education, where this online education can be more safe, where young people can take them from this online education from home. At the same time, we can try to use this bad time we are in right now to use it some more protective to learn new skills, to improve new academic degree as well, where we try in same times to say we need to use our time very well right now in this moment as when we are staying at home with the online education. And from the other side, we try to not to stop any other activity, but to move all the activity we do normally offline to do it online, and to keep what we are doing. Like, for example, one of our courses, it's how to build your own business. We move it from offline workshop to be online workshop, to try also to keep young people the same way about this pandemic going to be over, but also our life still need to go on, and we need to learn more things, and we need to be ready after the pandemic is end, what we can do. We tried really to try to bring young people together, to make them more fun time online together, to make them more close, to let them feel about we feeling about you. We try to do all our best to do something make you happy in this time, and also at the same time to try to make them aware and understood about what's going on about this pandemic, how we can deal with, how we can face this pandemic. Like one from the project the Youth Assembly right now work on, it's about how we can educate the student who study medicine and who is in the front line, more information about the pandemic, how they can deal with the pandemic inside Syria, where this can be and more capacity and support for them to be able to deal with this issue.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Ehab, for actually highlighting these many and very important ways in which you are really engaging Syrian youth in this moment of the pandemic and moving your work online and adapting to the context in very, very difficult circumstances. I'm also going to, before we go back to Janielle, introduce our guest, Antti, who is joining us now from the United States. Antti, if you may just briefly say a few words, introduce yourself, where you're calling us from, as well as maybe say how important this topic of mental health is to you and to the people that you engage with in your work. Your volume is not coming out. I don't know if everyone can hear you. Still, I think we cannot hear you yet. But hopefully this is going to be resolved in a minute. But as no, not yet. I can't hear you. Can anyone hear him? Ehab, can you hear?
No, I cannot hear him.
All right. Let's see if it's resolved. But as Antti is trying to figure out that the sound issue, let's maybe go back again to Janielle, if you may say a few words, especially related to your work in Afghanistan. You've mentioned earlier that you work with kids and youth in Afghanistan, helping them develop music skills. And one thing that I would like to ask you particularly, how difficult is it to introduce music education in a country, and not just music education, in a country that does not necessarily believe in these very artistic ways of engaging, but also in your context, coming from as an outsider, what have been some of the challenges that you faced in introducing music education program in Afghanistan? Also taking in mind or keeping in mind that the context of war sometimes make it really hard for people to engage with music, or to feel like music is the solution to their work, to their lives, sorry.
Thanks for the question. So the astounding thing about Afghanistan is that they have a very rich musical cultural heritage, and they have instruments that are unique to Afghanistan that you can only find in Afghanistan, and some instruments that overlap with Pakistan and with India. And so what has happened is that due to war and due to the Taliban times when music was banned, that was some of the things that came in a way of music being spread, all over the country, and for the young generation to continue learning those traditions. So one of the things that where I'm working at is trying to do is to revive these traditions and to bring them back to this generation. And not only that, we are also bringing in a fusion of music that is from the Western, or you could say classical music arts. So I, being there as a piano teacher, I'm bringing in a variety of music styles, not just the Afghan styles. And in that, I actually learn a lot from my students. I learn a lot about Afghan music and the culture there. So in that way, I always see music as a peace-building tool, because it brings people from different cultures together. And even within Afghanistan, when there are different ethnic groups and there are different cultures even among these different groups, when we come together to make music, we realize that there's so much to share. Even amidst our differences, there is a great variety in music. So that's something that I always share with people, that we have it in Afghanistan. It's not that they didn't have music and we're bringing in music. It's that they have it, and it's just now we want the next generation to know that they have this rich heritage and that they can continue in it.
Thank you very much for highlighting that is rich in terms of cultural heritage and music. And I think this is really one thing that you've highlighted, that it's something that you're building upon. It's not that you're bringing something new, but you're really building on the rich musical culture that the Afghan people have. And I think it's also important to highlight this in terms of the work that Ehab, you're doing with the Syrian community. And I believe that to a large extent, music and art has also been useful in helping communities to sustain themselves during hardship. And I wonder to what extent, if you may maybe complement what Janielle was saying, to what extent do you see arts and music particularly coming into play in helping communities to overcome the pandemic? In what ways do you see that coming into play?
Like, from the way using the art, it's come with us last month by doing the awareness about all the awareness campaign about the pandemic. It starts by character. When we try to design different character can be funny normally, to show people what's mean this is coronavirus, how we can deal with this, why we need to stay at home, to make it more from the side of fun, and then same times to tell people more about the situation, where we are, how we can deal with. This is how it's come by art, and also at the same time we find people able to do more art at home, and they have time to do art. People really are very creative. People have the way and the possibility to learn music, to hear music, to play music, and also to do art. This is where we try to push and to ask people to present them own art. Like, for example, one from the example we have as well, we have a campaign called The Voice of Young Syrian, where we try to present the voice of those young Syrian by different way of articles, video, graphic design, or other. And we find very, very nice designs always come up by young women, young Syrian. She tried really to present what the situation she live in right now, with different way to present word, and also to present different faces, able to present the situation, the feeling she have. It was very interesting as well. The pandemic give more time for people and attention on something we don't have time for normally. Like, because we stay at home, we have different way of life right now. We are not able to spend a lot of time outside how we spend it normally with transport or other. This we have more possibility to work on. We cannot hear you.
Oh, yes. You've highlighted very important examples, Ehab, in terms of how arts is really an important tool in helping communities and individuals cope with the pandemic. And I think one thing that I take away from that is what you're saying, that you use arts in a fun way, in a very creative and fun way, so that people, especially young children, and I'm talking particularly to families who in this time may be having small children at home and who are wondering, how do you keep resilience among young kids when even adults are struggling with uncertainty and so on. I think arts and using it in a fun way can be a very useful way of engaging with children, especially. Let's bring in Antti again. I hope this time his sound works. Antti, can you hear us?
I can hear you. How about you? Can you hear me?
We can hear.
Yes, we
finally. Thank you very much for joining the call again. Antti, if you may just quickly introduce yourself, where you're calling us from, and why this topic of mental health is important to you and to the work that you do.
Well, Christian, I just want to first congratulate you. I think this is extremely timely and necessary, and I feel extremely strong for the work and the people you are convening here. I have myself tried to convene the religious and traditional peacemakers, and the way to serve people in the ground, the way you do it, it's just beautiful. My background to this question is comes from about 20 years of mediation, and only gradually did I start to realize how a lot of the peacemakers are wounded because of the work they do. And we started to create this program, which we called Wounded Healers. And we realized that without helping the peacemakers to maintain their resilience, they will get tired and exhausted and can't continue their work. And from this angle, we started to look into how people are coping in this current situation. And it's just so painful to realize that the more harsher the situation is, the more pressure the peacemakers are likely to experience. Because not only are they having difficulties to find food and medical aid, but there still continued to be expected by the community to go and intervene and help them with this desperate situation. And with this kind of virus, you easily get exposed. And some of these peacemakers are elderly and are from the vulnerable groups. So I realized that since this will be taking for quite some time, if we lose the ability of these peacemakers to work, we will have even worse situations. So that's why I wanted to connect with other actors and then provide some support. This is basically an introduction. I'm happy to speak more later.
Thank you very much indeed, Antti, for that warm introduction. In fact, I think, and I fully agree with you in what you shared, especially in terms of vulnerable communities. In this particular moment, the elderly communities are very much affected by the pandemic, and also people with predisposed health conditions who may who are worried when they think of what in contracting the pandemic or the infection would have in terms of financial implications, emotional implications for their families and loved ones as well. Now, let's continue into this conversation. I'd like to bring in now our friend Janielle. You've talked about music as a very important tool in terms of bringing communities together, especially those that are divided, but also in the context of this crisis specifically. I wonder if you can share a few examples of how maybe you've tried to engage engage online with some of your students, or how you're trying to use music yourself to help people deal with mental health, if you can give an example.
Things that I love doing. I am a piano teacher, and I teach music classes to classrooms of students. But one of the things that I love doing in my own time and with close friends is songwriting. And that's something that during this time, you know, when you have time, you start, you know, doing the stuff that you really love, and you forget the time when you do the things like, you know, like songwriting. For me, that's one of those things. And so I've tried to share that with a few friends and even those who are far away from me via Zoom sessions. And so it's been really amazing to realize that you can write a song with someone or write a poem together on Zoom. And I would use my ukulele or my guitar, and my friend on the other side would be doing the same thing. And I really found such sessions very encouraging. And I think especially for the person on the other side, it's also very encouraging because a lot of people don't think that they can be songwriters. They often think that, oh, it's just the people with the big hits who can do it. And they don't think of themselves as being able to express something creatively and not be judged for it. So coming from a teacher's point of view, I always think if every student realize that they have the gift of songwriting, of putting, you know, things to words and to music to express something in their hearts, that could be one of the ways to change the world, or how people interact with each other, and how people share their feelings or their dreams and their hopes, not just in words, but through music, and also how people can express their frustration or their sadness or the struggles that they're facing, not necessarily in words, but through song or through melodies.
Thank you very much. It's very heartwarming to hear the many ways in which you use music and poetry and other forms of arts to engage people online, and to help them start using their sorrow or transforming their suffering really through music to be even more resilient and to engage with other communities. I think it's also important to highlight that music is a talent and it's a gift, but not everyone is as talented musically, right? So, or not everyone can write a poem, you know. I know so many of my friends who really would struggle to write even one stanza. But I wonder if you can give other ideas on how can other people who are don't necessarily feel artistically endowed, how can they really build their resilience in this particular time? What is your approach to that, Janielle?
Well, often when I do workshops, I ask, put up your hand if you've ever sung in the shower. Most people have. Put up your hand if you've ever washed dishes and turned on music and you know, sang with your sister, your brother, or, you know, tried to make a fun time out of it. And most people have. And so what I always try to get people to understand is that music, it comes naturally to most people. That's why we all love music, and we connect with different kinds of music. When it comes to expressing ourselves, maybe most people don't think of writing poems, you know, or they just rather listen to a song rather than create something themselves. But I always think you can start with something small, like it can even start with a photograph, or it can start with a story or a book that you're reading, or even a movie that you've watched, or something that you saw on social media, or a message that a friend sent you and you feel touched by that message. It can start with something that you already have, and you can just write something simple, write 1 line or 2 lines about how you feel about that. And then you start to get going when you realize that, okay, this is from me and I'm expressing something. And when it comes to putting a melody to something, I personally think it's often very simple. You don't have to have an instrument because you have your voice, and you don't have to have a perfect voice because you just want to make a sound, to make a melody, and you can just make up a melody on the spot, and it doesn't have to be perfect, because you'll be surprised, you know, what your soul pours out when you want to express something, and you kind of switch off the the self-judgment. But yeah, that's why I said it helps when you have someone else, and that's what I love to do, to encourage people to do that.
Fantastic. In the videos online, also that you don't necessarily you can just start from where you are. You can start with the skills that you have, and you never know, you may actually find inspiration and imagination actually flowing with you as you do that, and helping you to also get in touch with your deeper self and be able to understand how you can draw strength from within to overcome some of these very troubling times. Now we want to go back to Antti. You've talked earlier about the work, especially you've really pointed to the need to pay attention to vulnerable communities, the elderly communities that are affected, especially during this period of the pandemic. Would you mind sharing a little bit more about that you do with the Mary Boch Reconciliation Center, and more broadly talk to us about how you are helping local peace builders in different parts of the world build their capacities, rather to interact with these communities that are vulnerable in this pandemic period?
So when this pandemic started, and we realized the pressures people are feeling in the war zones and increasingly in all parts of the world, we convened with my colleagues and wondered what we could do. And fortunately, I had some incredible colleagues that had some knowledge and understanding on this. My dear colleague and friend Nicholas Sherwood started to compile a guide for self-care and resilience and how to strive under the COVID situation. And then we had just started to work with Rhoda Ollard, a wonderful clinical therapist, American Somali, who had worked in Somalia on this subject. And then one of my colleagues, Annalisa Jackson, started to convene a task force. So we have actually created a task force for this. So what they are doing is that they're looking for the online material and compiling them into guides. And the second is that we're reaching out to organizations who have a local staff remaining in war zones, but especially their partners, but also for the community-based peace builders, which are basically people without institutional support. And as well, increasing hopefully this understanding amidst the peace building organizations, how you really have to care for your partners, your staff, and these people at this time. But the very significant part of all of this is the peer support. So we do believe that this community of people, trusted people you can talk to and be open and vulnerable, is the critical foundation. So we are setting up some mechanisms how we can help such peer groups to be established, and would love to do that with you, Kristin. And we'd love to have something maybe focusing, like there's already a group for just young women where they can speak about what they're facing among themselves. So I'll just bring up some key elements in this. Besides the community, and I think you spoke just about it, the second thing is to realize the connection of mind and body. We come from different traditions and we use different terms for it. For someone, it can be just about prayer. When you rest, when you settle, when you focus and you pray. For somebody, it can be a breathing exercise. For somebody, a mindfulness or a yoga. But it's really necessary to realize this connection of mind and body and nurture it. The second is, which you do really well, is the physical energy. So we can generate energy in our body through the physical exercises. And thank you for the push-up challenges. Third is the mental energy, and here I think you all realize that how positive thoughts actually become energy. And I think this idea of music and being creative and being connected to your inner feelings and finding expressions for them is such a beautiful way and a significant part of this mental energy. And then there's this emotional energy, which is a lot related to why we have become peacemakers. We have this calling, we see the suffering, we have this urge to do something about it. And when you do serve, when you have something clearly in mind what you can do, it gives you purpose and it gives you a lot of energy. However, in this time, it can also become really tricky. And if you have been in that position and you're not unable to respond to these calls, it can also drain you. We speak about something we call like a moral injury that can appear in these situations when you feel the suffering, you feel you see the suffering and you urge to do something, but it's impossible or too dangerous to do that. So what we try to do in these peer groups or in the guides is to provide some advice how to monitor and shift these things when you are isolated.
Indeed. Thank you very much, Antti, for sharing that. And I'm sure many of our online viewers as well who are working in different contexts of conflicts can also tune into the work that you're doing. If you don't mind sharing a link to your work after this call.
Absolutely.
Of our viewers as well can tune in and actually tap into the resources that are already available to help themselves and their community building the peer groups that are needed to support each other. I believe indeed that we are a community that's supposed to bind to, especially in times of challenges, because that's when we show ourselves beyond the times that we are facing, that we are a strong global community. And I also want to hear from our friend Ehab in this particular time, especially as working with Syrians in this very difficult time. Do you feel like there's been an overpouring sense of support and solidarity with the Syrian plight during this pandemic period, or do you feel like that has not been the case? And what is your call to the work that you are doing? What kind of message would you give to our viewers all over the world in terms of supporting Syrians in this particular time as well?
Yes, how I see it right now between the Syrians and the Syrian NGOs community, the civil society, how they're trying to respond to the situation right now, it's very, very interesting with all the capacity they try to put, with all this cooperation I see always, they're trying to bring a new way to include young people with the new system far away from the situation where we are right now. Like as when we speak about organizing different material online, we're organizing webinars, organizing workshops, and at the same time, what I see there is many other organizations trying to bring up a new different program to have peer-by-peer consulting between young people and like social consulting can be, and it's good as well right now to announce officially as Youth Assembly going to have a partnership with the German organization able to cover all this for young people in Syria, where we are able to give the opportunity for young Syrian to be in consulting with other young people from who have the experience to be to consult about all the situation. And also at the same time, what I see, the activity we're trying to organize always and to bring young people together to create a new atmosphere between those young people. It's very interested to bring more idea and more fun for those young people. And the call I can give right now, and this is maybe from the experience I get in the last months, about you need to ask about help. It's not bad to ask about help. Don't be shy to ask about help. Like, because you're trying to help yourself to help the community. Ask about help when you feel bad. You need someone to talk to. Someone maybe can hear you. Someone can maybe advise you. For this, don't be shy. Try to ask about just some new strategy can help you to understand the situation maybe, or how can you able to deal with your situation working from home, to learn a new ways about how I can deal with my study from home. This is very important. Keep yourself strong, because this is what we need. We need you strong because you can keep the rest of the community strong as well. You are the young people, the majority of this community where we can put on you. For this, be aware always about situation. Try always to close and to cross all the fake news trying to come up to share different difficult information. Try also to educate about the situation and to aware the other people about how we can deal and to stop this pandemic.
Fantastic. Brilliantly actually said. And I'm happy you've also touched on the point of fake news and disinformation that is also circulating in this time. And I think that also can dwarf a little bit of our focus in terms of really joining our hands together as local peace builders, as a global community of peace builders to support one another in this difficult time. And I also want to bring in our friend Janielle. You've really helped us as well to understand how music can really play a significant role in helping us overcome the pandemic or dealing with the mental challenges that come with the pandemic. I to give you maybe a chance if you have any guitar or anything you want to play, a song, I don't know, but just really bringing to life what we've been talking about, because it's one thing to talk about something and yet another thing to go in the experience of it. So I don't know if you would like to maybe show us a little bit of your talent.
Sure. Okay. If you give me 2 minutes. So this is a song that I've written this song. It's called Crazy Hope. I hope you can hear the lyrics. We got children crying out, wondering who will reach out. Look out, stand out from the crowd of confused faces in a world of shattered spaces, broken towers, corrupted powers in our world. We got voices drowning out, turning up where no one knows the better way, the deeper sound from the town of forgotten dreamers in a sea of unknown faces, broken mirrors, faceless warriors in our world. It's got me a crazy hope, and I don't know till I pray, till I say, make me new. It's gotta be a different road. I don't know till I pray, till I say that it's hopefully crazy. The waters of the mountains that moves my soul. That parts the oceans, unites the world. That is hopefully crazy. We are dreamers in our streets, catching darkness with our feet, with our words, with our deeds, in a firework of colors, in a heaven without borders, wide open spaces, sons and daughters, living free. There's gotta be a way to hope, I don't know till I pray, till I say, make me new. There's gotta be a different road. I don't know till I pray, till I say that it's hopeless crazy. Oh, oh, oh. And the mountains that moves my soul. That is hopeless crazy. Oh, 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 oh. That parts the oceans, that's the world. That is hopeless crazy.
Fantastic. Wow. I am really moved. Thank you very, very much. This was just the best moment, I think, of the call. I really have enjoyed the flow and the words behind it. If you actually want to share the lyrics to that text in the comment of this call, that would be great, so that actually our viewers as well can also connect with the lyrics, those who are not able to listen to it fully. Now, we're drawing actually almost to the end of our call today, but I also want to acknowledge our online viewers, those who are joining us. I can see Patrick Alexi joining us today from Guinea. We have Fatima Jabari, who says hi to Antti. We also have Joseph Tsongo. I'm following from the DRC eastern part of the country, which is torn apart by conflicts and violence. I appreciate the work that you're doing. I have a small question: how we Peacebuilders can act against the coronavirus, and this is in a context of a crisis. Please tell me specifically. Well, this is definitely a question that we can continue all thinking about. Indeed, this whole live streaming is how we can stand together, local Peacebuilders from all around the world, to show solidarity during and even beyond the pandemic. We also have Iyam Hussein, who has joined us and says, raising awareness is very important. Congratulations on the good work. We also have Basel Akkad, who says, happiness is everywhere. It's all about following your passion. Indeed, on that note, it's all about following your passion. How do we take this very message home when it comes to dealing with the mental health challenge that comes with living through the pandemic? What message do you have, Antti, as we close this session today, to those who are tuning in, to those who are trying to follow their passion but still trapped in their home, to actually don't know what is their passion, or just feel a sense of hopelessness with the weight of dealing with the pandemic.
Thank you, Christian. And I'd like to bring the words of Rhoda, who actually had faced a lot of difficulties discussing about the mental health issues in Somalia, because there was a huge stigma against it. And basically, if you think about the decades of civil war, everybody has experienced this sort of trauma, and that trauma is affecting the way they are thinking and reacting. So what she started to speak about was the wounds of mind. So instead of speaking about mental health or trauma, she spoke about the wounds of mind, where people could realize that all of us actually carry. So destigmatizing these issues and being open and vulnerable is extremely significant, because more or less so many people carry trauma, and if the effects of trauma are not making visible. The second is the beauty which we saw in this music, but in all of us. And I think there is something really unique and special inside you that is needed for the people around you. And I think for, like the question from DRC Congo, I think the task of the Peacebuilders may in some cases be to be involved in the aid deliveries, but I think also especially in the community cohesion. But at this time, please bring your realities, tell us, share what's going on, speak openly what you need. There's a community around you, you're not alone, and we will not let you down.
Indeed, you're not alone, we'll not let you down. Let's hear as well from Ehab. Any closing word in terms of reminding us that we can go through this together, especially those who are already dealing with mental health? And I'd like to acknowledge those who during in this time have lost loved ones or lost jobs or are really living in some kind of precarity. What message do you give to them, especially to our Syrian brothers and sisters as well who are joining in today?
Yeah, I want also as well to say you are not alone. We are always you. We are always here for you, trying to work hard to provide something new, to try to keep you engaged with us, motivated with us, what we try to do. Maybe this time it's good for you to learn something new, to try to discover something new as well. Try to find your hobbies, try to find your creativity as a young person. I can say we are always around. Just get in touch with us. You will find a lot. We know exactly how to do this.
Thank you very much indeed, Ehab. And again, all our online viewers and those who are watching us from home, you're not alone. We're standing together as a global community of local peace builders, and we believe that we can do this together. Maybe also giving to Janielle a final message or final word to our online audience who have really enjoyed your beautiful song. Again, thank you so much for sharing it with us.
To say that everyone who's listening in and who will listen in later, that this is a passing time. It's a season for all of us to realign ourselves with the things that are important to us. And I know some people are suffering more than others, but like what these guys said, you know, you're not alone in this world. Be free to reach out to those of us who are here and who want to help in different ways. So yeah, all the best to you all.
Fantastic. Again, thank you very much to all of you, our esteemed panelists, for making time. I know, Janielle, right now it's really late for you to go to bed. So thank you so much for taking the time so late at night to join us in this call. Thank you, Ehab, for joining in the call. This was very enriching, and thank you so much for the amazing work you're doing. Thank you so much, Antti, as well, for really enlightening us on the very different ways that we can join efforts, the many dimensions that need to be paid attention to in terms of supporting each other, overcome the mental barriers that the pandemic has brought to us. And I'm sure many of our followers will tune in your respective works. If you may share your websites after the call so that everyone can continue connecting with the work that you do. And to all of you who have joined us today, thank you again. We wish you strength, we wish you resilience, and we hope to see you again next Saturday on this very channel. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.